So we're going to start with a unitary system, which is basically when the power is concentrated on the central government with very little power reserved for the subunits. So a unitary system's characteristics is that there would be centralized power in one specific geographical location, and since it's just a central government, there will be a single government, or basically a single set of government. So there will be a single supreme legislature, a single body executive, and one supreme judiciary. An example of a single government would be the UK. And all the power and legislative authority would rest with the national government. So, for example, England, the parliament would have all the power. And they may or may not have a written constitution. Some countries do have, but some countries don't, like the UK. And now for devolution. And so devolution is just basically the transfer of power from a central government to a subunit authority. And there are 3 causes of devolution, which is 1, ethnic forces, and it's when a distinct subgroup has a strong identity and a lot of pride for their culture, and so they want control. 2 is when economic forces arises. Maybe one of the areas wants to go further economically, unlike other areas. And 3rd, the spatial forces. It's when a subunit is remote and isolated, and the national government can't really conveniently and efficiently rule over them. So the benefit would be they're quick to act in emergencies and when passing law, and the nation would be more unified as one nation since there's one government. And one other benefits would be that it allows a broad application of national policies and standardized government services across regions. Say education, maybe there's a policy for better education, and so this policy would apply to the whole nation and not just one specific location. And the detriments first is the voice is really limited, and the government can actually just ignore the subunits and do whatever they want and just listen to the majority. And since everything is unified as one, there's no diversity. And obviously this can lead to dictatorship since there's one main single power in one area and not really scattered all around. And well, there's some countries don't actually need a constitution, so it's free will state, man. And now for the federal system, which is basically when the power is shared and distributed between the national and regional governments. So basically decentralization. And its characteristics is that since a lot of subunits were given power, they would also have their own governments, and so there would be separate legislatures and executives. However, certain powers remain totally with the national government, like foreign policy, the military, and defense. And they would implement regional policies and laws. They must also have a written constitution, and federalism doesn't actually need to be wholly uniform. Power can be distributed unevenly, and that doesn't mean that the national government would have more power. And this would be called asymmetric federalism, which Russia uses. And I just want to add that in the federal system, it doesn't mean that the central government cannot be powerful. They can, though with limits. And now for the benefits. So this encourages policy experimentation by local authorities. So whenever a subunit implements a law, you can see that as a testing ground, which other subunits can analyze. With this system, the government and the citizen can feel much closer to one another. And now its power, the local government can represent the people and their interests. And this system also prevents tyranny. And now the detriments. This system prevents national policies. There's conflict of authority when the national and regional fights for authority. And there's also lack of accountability. Since the subunit has its own power, its own system, everything would be more complicated and more layered. Thus, when there's actually something wrong, you wouldn't really know who to blame because it's just so layered. And then it also promotes smaller level of individualistic pride. It encourages divisions. So yep, that's it. So now for the summary. So basically unitary is just when power is in the middle and not really distributed among the federal governments. They're simple, so they're quick to do things, but then there's possibility of dictatorship because it's just so simple. National policies are great, but then it would not really represent every local state. And for the federal system, it's just basically when power and responsibilities are divided through subunits and the central government. There's diversity in voice, but then it encourages divisions. It prevents tyranny, but then it also lacks accountability.
The parliamentary system comprises of 2 main elements. The prime ministers and their cabinets come out of the legislature, and that the legislature is used to elect and remove the prime minister from office. Power is often divided between a head of government, which is the prime minister who holds executive power, and a head of state, who is the monarch, who holds ceremonial power. The prime minister is also often the head of the party with the majority of seats in legislature. This means that the executive and legislative branches are often fused and do not check and balance each other's powers. Moreover, the public does not directly elect the country's leader, but rather directly elects the party, and the party will later elect the prime minister and the cabinet members. A coalition government can also be formed when a party holds a plurality of seats, which means more seats than other parties, but still less than 50% of the total number of seats. In a coalition government, the prime minister comes from the largest party, and cabinet members would come from the coalition parties. A vote of no confidence happens when the prime minister is no longer having the majority support for them. And once this happens, a new prime minister may be appointed. The government might still continue with modified policies, or a general election can occur. The benefits of this system include efficiency in policymaking, the fusion of executive and legislative branches, which lead to lower constitutional conflicts, as well as supports for more opinions from many parties through a coalition government. Detriments include policies that are often changed or revised, no checks and balances between executive and legislative branches, and reduction in minority party voices when the largest party is in control. In the presidential system, the president is directly elected by the public for a fixed term. Note that they had to fight other members of their own party to run up the ranks in order to run for president. They have control over the cabinet as well as the legislative process. They're also the head of the state and the head of the government, and this basically means that they're the figurehead of their country as well as the executive. They're able to choose their own cabinets, and each branch of government does not have the power to easily remove one another through judicial reviews, legislative reviews, or the presidential review. And this leads to greater checks and balances due to a separation of powers. Benefits include greater checks and balances due to separation and independence of powers, and the people directly choose the person who is elected. Detriments include slow policymaking, minority parties lacking the influence over the executive, no vote of no confidence, and only having impeachment, which requires a wrongdoing from the president himself or herself, or to wait for the election after his or her term is ended. Moreover, a divided government might be the cause of the slow policymaking because different parties with different opposing agendas are working together. In a semi-presidential system, power is divided between the head of state, or the prime minister, and the head of government, which is the president. The president relies on fixed terms, whereas the prime ministers rely on the confidence of the legislature through the vote of no confidence, and the confidence of the president. The president often sets the policies, as well as the foreign policies, and the prime minister would execute the policies. As a summary, for the parliamentary system, people indirectly elect the prime minister. There is fused executive and legislative branches with little checks and balances. There's also a separate head of state and head of government. Coalition governments can occur when there is a plurality of votes, and a vote of no confidence can remove the prime minister when the legislature has lost support of the prime minister. In the presidential system, people directly elect the president in fixed terms. The president is both the head of state and head of government. There are greater checks and balances due to an independence of powers, and the president can choose their own cabinet members. In semi-presidential, people directly elect presidents and indirectly elects prime ministers. The president sets policies and the prime minister would execute them. And presidents lead in foreign policy and represents the country in international relations.
Our last topic is about first past the post versus proportional representation voting system. First past the post voting system is depend on voters casting their vote for a candidate of their choice, and the candidate who received the most vote win. In proportional representation, a legislative body is distributed according to the proportion of vote a party capture. In short, the number of votes a party receives has a certain effect on the number of seats in the legislature. Before I start, let's check 3 key terms. First, democratic regime. Democracy allows the people to have power and exercise their right on their own. So, democratic government in which power and civic responsibility are exercised by all citizens directly and fairly. Second, constituency. Constituency is each geographic area that an elected official represents. Moreover, mixed electoral system which combine first past the post and proportional representation. Some seats are single-member district and some are proportional representation. First past the post also called single-member district system because each constituency has only one representative who is the candidate with the plurality of votes. In short, winner takes all. It can amplify the political power of some parties while weakening the power of the other parties. Therefore, the losing parties win no representation at all. Also, there will sprout out two over-representation of major parties. If you look at the left, you can see the blue and red parties have taken over the legislature, which is characteristic of FPTP, a two-party system. Voters cast a single vote for a candidate of their choice. They can participate in political decision-making. Voting is a democratic and easy way for people to engage in politics. National politics becomes more driven by local politics. Unlike proportional representation, voters are interested in what candidates have to say, so they act independently of their party. The first benefit of FPTP system is a consolidation of vote. If one party is selected by integrating the vote, one party can work together and lead the way. The second advantage is efficiency. Single-party government do not worry about support from the other party to pass legislation. Also, it creates party culture and pride. The last benefit is that it's easy to understand and convenience. That contributes to the increased participation of the public in voting because it is the easiest way to participate in politics. The first detriment of the FPTP system is the exclusion of minor parties. Small parties will be eliminated and marginalized by other major parties. Second, the two-party system. Because a legislature might be dominated by two major parties, it is a problem of single ballot plurality rule election. Also, voters would feel that the vote cast for a small party will be wasted. Proportional representation means a legislative body is distributed according to the proportional vote. Unlike the two-party system of FPTP, PR system is a multi-member district. More than one legislative seat is contested in each district. The PR system attempts to decrease the number of votes that are wasted. Also, voters to select parties rather than individuals because the number of votes determine the number of seats in the legislature. If you look at the left, you can see the various color parties unlike the FPTP system. Voters cast their ballot for a party rather than candidate. And the percentage of vote a party receives from the district determines how many of district seats a party will gain. Minimum percentage of vote that a party must receive in order to even one seat in the legislature is usually 5%, which is called threshold. The first benefit of the PR system is multi-member district. Political parties are diversified and the number of distinct ideologies can be presented and shared. Second, fairer treatment of the minority parties. Small parties don't have enough political power rather than major parties, so the PR system considers this problem. Moreover, internally disciplined party. In the PR system, a party is considered more than an individual candidate. Therefore, since those who do not follow party's rule can be dropped from the party list. However, PR system produces weak coalition government rather than strong majority government. This means losing competitiveness and power internationally. Additionally, diversity under the PR system affects fragmentation and political instability inherent in managing a number of competitive interests. Also, parties with radical and reactionary political attitudes can be created. To sum up, first past the post is an election system that the person who wins most votes. FPTP is simple and effective voting system and major parties have political power unlike minor parties. Also, this election system can make a powerful government. On the other hand, proportional representation is the election system in which the share of seats a party wins match the share of vote it receives. In this election system, a minor party have a chance to get a district seat. Also, this election system is diverse and has a weak government. A mixed electoral system combines a plurality voting system with an element of proportional representation. A mixed electoral system in which voters get two votes, one for a candidate and the other for a party.